So for this video, we're going to look at an interesting question. Why are some people so good at quickly thinking on their feet and knowing what to say? And how can we get better at it? Now, I don't assume that everyone wants to necessarily be good at this, but I hope you'll agree that we all have moments where it's like, oh, we need to say the right thing, or after the fact, maybe we realize we wish we'd said something better. I know that happens to me a lot. So I think it's in our best interest to learn what we can do or how this process works. Why are some people so good at this? I think that's just an interesting avenue to explore. So that's what we're going to do. The vehicle I'm using to do that is something called cognitive complexity. Something that we all have certain levels of, and we all differ from person to person. So what is that? It's how our thoughts and perceptions are structured and organized. It's not about how much information we have, it's how sophisticated it's structured. So we'll go into more detail on that. So, yeah, one element of complexity to think about is schema. I talked about that in a different video. Our mental framework, our mental blueprint for how things are organized. Well, those are kinds of cognitive structures. They're in our mind. We organize things a certain way. And, so they're the way our thoughts are structured. But schema, before you start writing anything else here, schema can be either organized in really simple ways or really complex ways. And that's where cognitive complexity comes in. So there are a couple, and I'm going to use examples in a minute, but there are a couple of dimensions that kind of shape or kind of are measures of how sophisticated our schemas are structured. The first is differentiation. This is just how many terms we have in a certain schema. And integration is how complexly the terms are interrelated to each other. I don't expect either of those definitions to mean much to you right now, so let me go through with a couple, an example or two. So if you think about a coworker that or think about a manager. Think about a manager that you have that is really good, really good manager. And if I asked you to write down all the terms you could think of to describe that manager, and I gave you 5 minutes to do it, and you came back, different people's lists would be, different lengths. So some would have shorter lists, some would have longer lists. And really, differentiation is just how many terms are on your list. So the longer the list, the more differentiated it is, the more terms you have. So integration is how, and this is a harder one to grasp, and it's one there because it's harder to grasp. I'm not going to be as meticulous about expecting you to really understand this exquisitely, but it's just how complexly or how sophisticated the terms are related to each other. Still, that probably doesn't help. So let me give you an example. I want you to think about what your list would be compared to a 7-year-old's list. What would a 7-year-old's list be compared to yours? First of all, I'm really hoping, and I'm pretty confident, yours would be a lot longer. You know a lot more terminology. Well, that tells us that that your schema for the idea of a good manager has more terms in it. You can name, you could put more terms to name what you see happening with that manager. So you're more complex in that sense. Integration would be how how the terms on your list kind of weave together. And let me give you an example of high integration versus low integration. First of all, low integration would probably be like, think of the 7-year-olds. Oh, they're fun. They let us out early. They have a good sense of humor. Uh, they're nice to me. Okay, 4 terms. And notice how they're all the same. They're fun, have a good sense of humor, they let me out early, and they're nice to me. Those terms are kind of monotonous. They all kind of line up, and they're different ways of saying the exact same thing. Now, what might your list be? If and I guess I'll just think of previous supervisor I had who was really good. You know, patient with me, a really good mentor, um, really good at explaining things, helping me see how to handle different problems. Um, Also, were fairly funny, but really thoughtful and understanding. And when they disagreed with me, they did it in a way that was really kind of sophisticated. He asked a lot of questions, and I don't know if he ever really did tell me what to do, but I certainly did most of what he wanted to do. So I'm not saying my list is super impressive, and I could keep going probably, but that's just off the top of my head. But compared to 7 year olds, like some of those things weave in together. Like there's the mentoring aspect. There's also the fact that he was good at directing me to do different things different ways. So the ideas are just integrated more differently. And if I put negative things on, like, yeah, he could be kind of difficult at times, but I know he always meant well. You know, so I can put negatives on there, so that makes the list more sophisticated. But notice the negative also is tied to a positive. So it's just more integrated. The ideas are woven together in a more complex way. So that's integration. So some of us, when we communicate, we have very simple ideas. Uh, we just, okay, that was a good interaction, that was bad communication. And some of us are able to see more what's going on, like, oh, there's a pattern going on here, and every time this person does this, I notice that the other person responds in this way. Wow, that's a lot more sophisticated, more integrated in terms of understanding what's going on. So again, it's not necessarily about how much we know, it's about how it's organized. So what? So let's say you're more complex. What does that give you? Here are some things it gives you. First, you can see the bigger picture. One example is, like, I kind of just hinted at it. Like, if you can see patterns in an interaction, if you can start to see, oh, when this person starts arguing, taking this line of argument with me, I know here's where they're going to go with it. Oh, or I see what they're doing. This is them just fishing for compliments. You're seeing the bigger picture of what's going on. While others are just seeing, oh, they just said this, and they don't see anything more in it. Anomalies. An anomaly is when something unexpected happens, or something doesn't go as expected. So this happens to me sometimes with teaching. Certain things that I've taught over and over, I know that students struggle with, and when I don't get any questions about them, before assuming that I just taught it beautifully, I actually first I would actually think, oh, okay, why aren't they asking questions here? They usually have good questions here. So that's me spotting an anomaly that I wouldn't have spotted early in my career. Anticipating how things will work out. Okay, so so we have a sense of where an interaction is going to go and how it's going to end. Spotting patterns. We can start to see that where we certain things keep happening with the same person. Maybe that's an example. Like, oh, I see a pattern. We always get in this rut in this conversation where I'm pushing and they're I'm pushing for things and they're withdrawing and trying to evade me, that type of thing. That would be a pattern. And then kind of going back to the question I posed at the beginning, if you have, like, if you're really sophisticated when it comes to cognitive complexity, you're better at improvising and coming up with things to say. And so it's still, how do you do that? That's a challenging kind of thing to consider. But I think being more cognitively complex gives you that opportunity. So if you put all this together, if you have some of these abilities as a communicator, I think you're going to be better able to handle really challenging situations and get through them better. And so honestly, a major goal of this course is to help you develop more complexity so that you can better handle interpersonal situations that you face from now to the end of your life. So, if that's the goal, how can we improve our skills? Well, not just practice, but deliberate practice. So, so what's that mean? Deliberate practice. It means first there's an intense focus on the task, not necessarily fun. So, in other words, I'll give you an example that's not related to communication, but you can probably see how it could be applied. Before I learned what deliberate practice was, when I'd practice drums, I would just go down and I would play fun songs that I enjoyed playing, and I already knew, usually knew how to play, or, within a few tries I could figure them out, and I'd just play them and have fun. That's not deliberate practice. What I do now is often I'll take a page of music and one that's often really above my head, and I will just work at it until I get the coordination out. It's not as fun, and it's really hard, and there are a lot more setbacks, but I am really focused on trying to do it, and I'm listening to every little thing about how I'm doing. I'm really being more critical. I don't do this 100% of the time. I can still end practice with some fun songs, but I spend most of my time, really doing this. So there's an intense focus on the task, and then trying difficult things, not just doing the easy part. That's another example. The example I gave kind of shows that. Then reflection after the fact, and this one is probably how you're going to do it more with communication, because if you're in the middle, like, you can't like be in a job interview and like be so hyper focused on how am I communicating, or like in a presentation, how am I communicating. That intense focus part that I put above is going to be hard. um so trying the difficult is possible. You can throw yourself into some challenging situations and try to get out of them. That's fine. But often what we're going to have to do is reflect after the fact. You can't do it during communication often, but you can after the fact. Like, okay, that interaction really didn't go well. I wonder why. What could I have done differently? Why didn't it go well? What worked, what didn't work. If you do that kind of thing, you're going to get more mileage out of your experience than others are. You're going to be a lot wiser for it. So these are all elements of deliberate practice, and there'll be things we do this semester that kind of get you to do deliberate practice, so that you can kind of think through, okay, what's working well, what isn't, that type of thing. But you compare two people, like, because if this was all about just time and age, then as I like to joke, then the best professors on this campus would be the oldest. Really, they would, because they've had more time. They've been more time in the classroom. So why aren't all of them the best? Some probably are. Why? Well, it's because some just, they practice. They go through and they don't really think about it. Others intensely kind of focus. They challenge themselves trying difficult things, and then after the fact they consider, why did that not go well, or what went so well about that. And they get more out of their experience. They spend the same number of hours in the classroom as everyone else, but they get more for their effort. And so to the extent you want to improve as a communicator, then putting some thought and effort into it is going to be part of the plan. These two things are not deliberate practice at all. In fact, one kind of contradicts what I said above, but it might work better for communication. Besides deliberate practice, a mentor can help. I don't think you're going to need a formal communication mentor, but so it's probably a little less realistic, although asking people for feedback and help can be part of the process. But low risk environment. Sometimes with communication, it's hard to, like assertiveness. You don't want to go in with someone who intimidates you and start asserting yourself left and right. So try it on a lower level with friends. Where does someone want to go to dinner? Okay, assert yourself. Say, I'd like to go here. We should do this. And then let's say it bombs horribly. So what? It's just among friends, and it's about something meaningless. So this is a good way to kind of gently get better at different skills. So I wouldn't throw yourself in the deep end and pull out what we're doing in the middle of like your harshest conflict with the relationship that matters most to you. I would do these things on a lower level with people you're comfortable with and trying it kind of baby steps. So, but if you do these kinds of things, I think you'll be in good shape in terms of really getting better at these types of skills. So we'll actually apply this more when we get in class, and I've kind of hinted already at how it applies to class. So I look forward to working on it in class.